Imagine a chess player who makes one bold move and suddenly realizes every single exit is blocked. That is exactly where the United States finds itself today. Billions of dollars burned, American soldiers dead, oil prices spiking, stock markets shaking, and the very people who once cheered this war are now demanding it stop. So here's the question nobody wants to answer. If America wants this war to end, why can't it? What you are about to hear is not a simple story of good versus evil. It is something far more unsettling. A superpower that walked into a room and quietly discovered the door had locked behind it. Stay with us, because by the end of this, you will see the Middle East and America's role in it in a completely different light. When this conflict with Iran began, the American war machine was confident. Airstrikes, precision bombs, a calculated military campaign designed to be swift and surgical. But wars rarely go the way they are planned. In just weeks, the United States had already absorbed over $35 billion in losses. American military personnel had been killed. The stock market had taken a visible hit. Fuel prices had climbed sharply, felt not just in Washington but in grocery stores and gas stations across the country. And here is what made it worse. The public had started turning. People who once stood firmly behind this administration were now asking uncomfortable questions. What exactly is the endgame? How many more lives? How much more money? But the most important question, the one that rarely gets asked openly, is this. Even if America wanted to stop this war today, could it? The answer is far more complicated than anyone in power wants to admit. To understand why this war cannot simply be switched off, we need to travel back a few years to another war that the world watched drag on far longer than expected. When Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, analysts on both sides privately acknowledged within the first week that a ceasefire was the most logical outcome. The destruction was enormous, the financial cost was unsustainable, the human toll was heartbreaking. And yet, the war continued for years. Why? Because in any conflict, a ceasefire is never just a pause. It is an admission. It is a negotiation table where one side is forced to accept what they lost. For Ukraine, stopping meant surrendering captured territory, making every death feel meaningless. For Russia, stopping meant withdrawing, a humiliation on the world stage. Neither side could afford that moment of visible defeat. Now, apply that same logic to America and Iran. If the United States unilaterally stops its military campaign, Iran will not simply stand down. Iranian forces would continue striking American military installations across the region. The Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical waterways, would remain under Iranian pressure. The entire Middle East would be reshaped by that single American retreat. And Iran knows this. Behind closed doors, Iran has already placed its terms on the table, and they are not small asks. First, full financial reparations from the United States for damages caused during this conflict. The figure being discussed runs close to $1 trillion. Second, formal recognition of Iran's Islamic governing system, not a diplomatic courtesy, a full public acknowledgement. Third, a permanent guarantee of non-aggression. And to enforce that guarantee, Iran wants something even more significant, a complete withdrawal of all American military bases from the Middle East. And finally, complete sovereignty over its nuclear enrichment program. No restrictions, no inspections, no conditions. Now, take a moment to think about what America accepting those terms would actually mean. It would not just be a ceasefire, it would signal the end of 40 years of carefully constructed American influence across the region. Every alliance built, every base established, every backroom deal made with Gulf governments, all of it dissolved in a single agreement. And America's allies in the region would be watching. Here's something the mainstream media rarely connects clearly.
Countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, and Bahrain have been operating under an invisible agreement with the United States for decades. America provides military protection. In return, these nations sell their oil and gas, the world's most essential commodity, exclusively in US dollars. This is what economists call the petrodollar system, and it is the foundation of American economic power. As long as the world needs oil and oil is priced in dollars, there is a global demand for American currency. That demand is what allows the United States to carry a national debt of nearly $38 trillion and still function. But the moment America retreats from the Middle East, the moment those Gulf nations no longer have American military protection, they have zero obligation to keep trading in dollars. They could switch to Chinese yuan, to euros, to a basket of currencies, and many of them have already been quietly exploring that option. If the petrodollar weakens, the dollar weakens. And if the dollar weakens while America's already drowning in debt, the interest payments alone could trigger an economic collapse that no stimulus package could fix. This is not speculation. This is the invisible tripwire that makes walking away from Iran almost financially impossible for Washington. With airstrikes failing to deliver the decisive blow and a ceasefire off the table, one option has entered serious discussion: a ground invasion. The United States has already moved over 50,000 troops into various Middle Eastern positions: Marines, Special Operations Units, Rapid Response Forces. But here is the brutal military reality. Iran is not Iraq. It is not Afghanistan. Iran is a country 5 times larger than Vietnam, a war that required over 500,000 American troops and still ended in strategic failure. Iran's terrain includes vast mountain ranges, underground tunnel networks, and a military that has spent decades preparing for exactly this kind of confrontation. Iran's armed forces have reportedly mobilized close to 1 million personnel in preparation for a potential ground engagement. And the geography makes invasion nightmarish. The most logical entry point, through Iraq or Turkey, runs directly into the Zagros mountain range, the same mountains that defeated a previous Iraqi invasion of Iran after 8 years of brutal, inconclusive warfare. Some strategists have proposed a more targeted option: seizing Karg Island, Iran's primary oil export hub, responsible for the overwhelming majority of Iranian petroleum exports. Control that island, the theory goes, and you strangle Iran's economy without occupying the entire country. But Iran knows this too, and Karg Island is almost certainly one of the most heavily defended points in the region. Every path forward carries an enormous price. Here is the part of the story that almost nobody is talking about. While America bleeds money and credibility, Iran has been quietly monetizing the chaos. Recent shipping industry reports reveal something extraordinary. Iranian authorities have begun charging vessels passing through the Strait of Hormuz a fee of approximately $2 million per ship for safe passage. Think about that for a moment. The Strait of Hormuz handles roughly 20% of the world's total oil supply. Thousands of tankers pass through it every year. At $2 million per ship, Iran could theoretically generate $60 billion annually, roughly 5% of its entire GDP, simply by controlling access to a waterway. Oil tankers desperate after weeks of delay, insurance companies already refusing to cover high-risk routes, shipping companies willing to pay almost any price to move their cargo. Iran has turned the world's most critical maritime choke point into a toll booth. And they're not stopping there. To the south, Iranian influence extends to the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, another critical passage connecting Asia to Europe and the Americas. Roughly 12% of global trade moves through that corridor. Iran, through regional allies, can effectively threaten that route without firing a single missile. Just the warning is enough to freeze insurance and halt shipping. Every week this war continues, Iran discovers new leverage, new pressure points, new revenue streams. Meanwhile, America's options narrow. So here is where we are. America cannot stop the war, because stopping means handing Iran a victory that reshapes the entire Middle East, collapses the petrodollar system, and signals to every rival power on Earth that American deterrence is no longer real. America cannot win the war quickly because Iran is too large, too prepared, and too strategically positioned to be defeated by air power alone. And a ground invasion risks becoming the most expensive military quagmire in American history. Meanwhile, Iran, despite its own casualties and economic damage, is finding ways to profit from the prolonged conflict, turning global dependency on its waterways into direct financial power. This is what it looks like when a superpower gets trapped, not by a larger army, not by a nuclear weapon, but by geography, economics, and 40 years of decisions that left no clean exit. The question now is not whether America can win this war. The question is whether America can afford to keep fighting it, and whether it can afford to stop. What do you think happens next? Can the United States find a way out of this trap, or is this conflict just getting started? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.